Lebih 20 tahun kerja sebagai kontraktor. Kerja kontraktor. Enggak, gaji met. Anak rumah pajai. Ngau serak ini ya dan.
Que nuestros antepasados también estuvieron acá y que fue un lugar muy sagrado para ellos, fue un cementerio, y ocupar esta tierra es como darle esa paz que por generación nunca se le ha dado.
The reason that I decided to apply for this project because the concept is Mekong 2030, which is something that's happening in the future. So that's interesting for me, how Laos in the next 10 years going to look like, how people going to look like, and the environmental issues that we talk about will be like. So that's challenging for me.
I don't believe any of this devil crap or this religious hocus pocus that's going on.
It may not be what you think.
You came to the Philippines to investigate a human trafficking report. Children are missing, body parts were found.
Marami na rin ako naririnig. People come, but they don't leave. They became like a culto.
You're investigating alleged human trafficking cases? You're here to stop the devil. There are many of them all over the world who believe in the devil's power.
So, Johan, right?
You can call me Joe.
Why are you applying for this job?
My wife and I, Khadija, she just got pregnant.
So what's no filter photography?
It was a photography business I started up a while back.
So why are you here?
It didn't work out.
Ao nei to mo we koe longa tau tupe. Si pore aga ke whakaonga. Whano si liu mai. Whano si liu mai.
Moses said, when I go to school, I won't have any friends.
You know what? Moses is a bloody kakamora.
No, but what I will do is teach you how to use your own beautiful voice.
Vi, you could do amazing things for your people, but you need to cut out all these distractions.
I know what I'm capable of, but you just won't listen to me.
So this is what she learned at that Flats University. How to cause trouble. You have these thoughts.
These thoughts, they're my own, Elvis. My family, my village has sacrificed so much for me to be here. And I'm not going to waste it.
I will not allow you to take any more from us.
Koe mga ahoa ni, ke lele ya koe mamea. I'm tired of molding myself to become who you want me to be. My name is Vaisea. Vaisea lona lote pulusi.
Jim? Is everything all right?
Why?
It's just that the last 2 months' bills haven't been paid.
I lost my job.
When?
3 months ago now.
Jim, they will take your home if you don't pay.
Is everything else all right? What did you do?
Why do you ask?
You seem different.
Different?
Drained. Down.
Is there something you're not telling me?
If there's anything at all, you should speak to someone. It'll help. We're not meant to walk this path alone.
Everything's fine.
Hi guys.
Hi, yeah. I think I can't
Hi.
hear what Ikram's saying.
Yeah.
Ikram, you might need.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I'm really sorry for
Yeah,
the
okay.
technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let's start over, guys. Hi. Welcome to webinar number 4, Kota Kinabalu Film Festival. And tonight we have a very, very interesting topics to talk with our panelists. Let me introduce you, Mr. James Lee. Mr. James Lee is our very own film director. Some might know him by his film Tolong Awe Aku Pontianak, Hysteria, as well as other film. He is one of the pioneers of Malaysian digital film movement. His film is The Beautiful Washing Machine, won the Best Asian Feature Award and received prize at Bangkok International Film Festival. There is Mr. Jeff.
Stuck.
And we have other panelists as well, and I'm excited to introduce you, Mr. Vincent Soberano. He is from the Philippines. The interesting, he not only direct the film, but he acts in it. I would like to call him Sifu. Why? Because Mr. Vincent also practice martial arts. So you guys don't play, huh? So he's the director of 8 movies where he does the acting and stunts in most of it. Notably, one of the popular one is the action-packed Blood Hunter Rise of the Hybrid, and so much more. Welcome, Sifu Vincent.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Hi,
coming.
everyone.
We also have Mr. Goh Ming Siu. He is from Singapore. He directed Repossession, also as well as 26 film and writers of 41 film, TV shows and series. Very experienced director,
Those are
Mr.
like
Goh Ming Siu.
for local TV. So yeah.
Local TVs, yeah. So
Yeah,
there
but
is Mr. Goh
is
Ming
my
Siu.
first film. Thank you. Like
And-
feature film.
Nice thing. Yes, one of your feature films. And going to, I can say your friends, Scott Hilliard, because you guys
Yes,
are directing the same movie. Scott Hilliard, yes. He is started his career as an actor since he's 9 years old. He played numerous acting roles, including a lead role before venturing into filmmaking with Repossession. He is also the founder of Monkey and Bow Studio. And thank you everyone for coming in for our very, very interesting topics on why do we love horror.
Sorry, start.
Get excited. Hello?
Yeah, this streaming is another horror altogether.
I know, right? This is like one of the horror things to start off with. So get excited, all the moviegoers, all the movie horror fan, because we will be discussing these topics tonight. Before I introduce, before we dive into the topics, just to set up the mood a bit, I would like to give an analogy. Watching horror films is like eating spice. We can't stand the spiciness, but yet we keep coming back for more. Also, watching horror movies is like falling in love. Sometimes it hurts, but we keep coming back for more. That is like the same like watching horror movies, which leave a very interesting question. Why? Why do we love watching horror movies so much? What makes a good horror movies? This and so much more we will discuss after this. But before that, please, I want to know how excited are you guys. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Just leave an emoji or leave, most importantly, leave your question for the panelists. And then let's move into.
Somebody say he doesn't understand English.
And then
Awesome.
we will, if you guys like, maybe we can switch into Bahasa for some of you guys. And then, but before we go deeper into that, grab all your popcorns, grab your drinks, just join us as your family to join us. We will watch the second trailer for tonight.
A lot of trailers. Go host.
I don't believe any of this devil crap or this religious hocus pocus that's going on.
It may not be what you think.
You came to the Philippines to investigate a human trafficking report. Children are missing, body parts were found.
Marami na rin ako naririnig. People come, but they don't leave. They became like a culto.
We're investigating alleged human trafficking cases. You're here to stop the devil. There are many of them all over the world who believe in the devil's power.
Grab your gear. We're going hunting.
Alam ko yung property na yan. Lahat na pumapasok dyan. Hindi yan lumalabas.
I don't believe in ghost stories, but man.
You kept on mentioning the word Yawa.
Demonyo ka rin!
Put it down! Put it down now! Taking you in.
Circle will now complete.
You cannot stop what has been written.
I'm gonna send you straight back to hell, you piece of shit!
Jim? Is everything all right?
Why?
It's just that the last 2 months' bills haven't been paid.
I lost my job.
When?
3 months ago now.
Jim, they will take your home if you don't pay.
Is everything else all right?
What did you do?
Why do you ask?
You seem different.
Difference?
Drained. Down.
Is there something you're not telling me?
If there's anything at all, you should speak to someone. It'll help. We're not meant to walk this path alone.
Everything's fine.
All right, that is the two trailer to kick off our discussion for today. And let us dive into the first questions for the panels. And let me start off this question with a story that some of you might find interesting. Here in Southeast Asia, there are plenty of ghost stories. For example, in Malaysia, we have a creature called penanggal or balan-balan, a head that can separate itself from the body where it floats around and eating blood, especially from an unborn child. In fact, there are legends that believe if we say or hear the word penanggal or balan-balan, they will hear it and they will come. This legend and other creatures around Southeast Asia is an example of a popular creature that derived from culture. and often being portrayed in horror movies, making it a popular genre. So, a part of watching our bag tonight, we want to know why horror movies are so popular in Southeast Asia. The film industry in Japan and Korea are booming with horror movies. So, in the eyes of a director, why is it so popular? Maybe we can start off with Mr. James Lee on this on the first question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, stop me if I'm going too long. Okay.
Sige.
Okay. Yeah. I think horror is fun for people to watch. Even sometimes they know it's gonna be bad. It's because it's a psychologically human love that thrill. It's like going for a roller coaster ride, going to haunted house. We love that maybe because I think it's part of the audience human nature to take risks, right? And I think horror is the most safest risk they can take. It's inside a cinema. So I think that's why whether it's a big budget horror film or low budget horror film, most of the time I think audience will want to go and give it a shot rather than, let's say, an action movie with unknown stars. They would rather watch famous action stars like Donnie Yen, then I'll watch it. But if there's no big star, they don't want to take the choice because they do not know if the action is good. But horror, there's no such thing as like this is a horror actors. I mean, at least these days. So you can even make a horror films with unknown new actors. So you don't need to have a big stars to sell a horror film. And I think that's the beauty of horror film because there's a lot of surprise. So when audience watch it, they do not know what to expect. They hope it's a good film, a good horror film. Now, even if they watch like 3 bad horror films in a row, I think they watch the next one because I think it's part of the what the audience love. And the most important thing is like in horror film, I think there's much more creativity, even these days compared to 80s and now because usually horror films are low budget. So the director have a lot of say in how or what he wants to do with the film. Whereas if you're doing a big budget action film or drama, a lot of the time the investors and producers will kind of like control how it's been made, what it needs to be done, who gonna be in this film. But in horror, because it's so low budget, generally I think the investors just want to make a quick buck of it. The director have a lot of freedom, and I noticed that I think even today, I think we all know that in the 80s, 70s, horror films was very popular in US. That's where Sam Raimi and all these guys become popular because they make all these ultra low budget horror films. And I think it still matters today. And I think it's the best genre for filmmakers to actually train to be real filmmakers because you're working with very limited resource and you need to tell a story, you need to direct, and you need to make sure the film actually is scary. So I think it's a very much more clearer objective as a genre compared to if I make my personal film, like art house film. That's very vague. It's all what I want to portray, and sometimes I don't even have to care about if the audience could get the point or they could understand the story. I think horror, if they buy a ticket to go and watch a horror movie, it needs to deliver. So it's got a clear objective, which I think it makes the filmmakers train themselves to really make a good film. Yeah.
All right. So, how about Mr. Goh Ming Siu? Do you agree with the points made by James Lee? For example, how was it in your case in making Repossession, for example?
Well, how am I going to say I disagree? No. No. I mean, I've been watching James's films since like the Beautiful Washing Machine. Well, I mean, we don't get a lot of them here in Singapore, but when I see his name on the movie, I definitely try my best to go and catch it because they're cool. But no, with Repossession, it's funny because it's kind of we didn't really necessarily take that approach. Like we tried to tell ourselves that, oh yeah, horror is one of the most profitable genres, and that's what we told investors and all that. But at the same time, we were also trying to make something that was very, very much more like a personal artistic expression. So we were actually trying to go for the art house genre, the art house horror genre, which is a thing nowadays. It's a very small niche, sub niche within like the horror genre. So it's a very tricky film actually, ours, just because we tried to do that. Yeah. But as to why people are drawn to horror, I mean, I definitely agree James, that about it being a safe thrill kind of thing. To me, I think people get to confront their fears and relieve their stresses and all that, while being at a psychological distance from the events on the screen. Like that that's all fake, and in a way that makes it easier to deal with. All the death, all the insanity, all that, right? It's like, oh, okay, that's fine. That's on the screen. You have that sense of control as an audience member. You're thrilled, you're scared, but you still have that control there, which is very different from, say, real life. When you have zero control over anything. Yeah.
So to venture into unknown and try to see what's mythical about particular movies. How about Vincent Sobareno? How was it in your eyes if you make horror films, for example, in the context of Philippines film industry, for example? Why is it so popular in Philippines, the horror movies?
Same reason as most of the other filmmakers said. The fear factor. It's very addicting, and Southeast Asians, we grew up with the supernatural. We grew up with with stories of the supernatural. In the Philippines, we have because our language are pretty similar to Malaysian. We have pretty similar like monsters and folklore. We have a monster that very similar to what you just talked about. In Filipino, we call it manananggal, and it's also a vampire-like creature, oftentimes a woman who separates her body from her, her upper body from the rest of her body, from her lower torso, and floats around and looks for unborn children, sort of thing. It's kind of the same. I think centuries and centuries of linkage between Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. The cultures and the superstitions and all that stuff have sort of melded even before the Spanish occupation kind of thing. So there's a lot of very, very similar stuff culture-wise. And I think for me, I grew up with superstition and stories of the supernatural, and it's always those kind of things that intrigue me and make me inject some kind of horror into my movies. And again, it's predictable. You're going to get scared. It's nothing is going to be as it seems, but yet you're in it for the ride, and it's quite addicting for a lot of people. And for me, most of the day, at the end of the day, growing up as a teenager and as a young man, for me, horror movies are a great date movie. It's the perfect time to bring a girl with you to the movie theater and just have her jump all over you, and it's fun, And for friends, it's a great movie to watch together as friends, because you kind of have this binding kind of experience with your friends. It's like everyone is like scared together, huddled up, and it really is a fun movie to watch for a group of people as well. So yeah.
All right, so horror movies are linkage to our culture, and it's fun to watch. That's why it's so popular. And what about Scott Hillard? Do you have something to add into this?
Actually, I agree with what everyone else has said, and especially what Vincent has said. It's a good time to bring a girl on a date too. Research has actually shown that, if you want the girl to have have a memorable first date, you got to increase the art. Bring a roller coaster or a horror movie. So scientifically proven. But yes, back to the question. Sorry. I believe. Well, this is more of a psychological aspect of the question. I think. Over the years, through evolution and all that, human beings have always been afraid of what's in the dark, right? And now, today, in modern times, because we're living in such safe times, we don't have to worry about if we sleep at night, is there going to be a monster coming out of the dark trying to get us? And I think through the years of evolution, there has we don't have to deal with that, but we keep on going to watch horror movies because there's this resonance of this primal danger, which we feel like like that we're supposed to feel something like that, but like nowadays we don't feel that. That's why we feel this resonance when we go to watch horror movies. That's just my opinion, though.
That's a very interesting point. And you guys actually spoiling my stories about the next question about the dating, because I've read a study published in Journal of Psychology and Social Psychology by Dr. Arthur Aaron find that fear may create arousing situation, just like what Mr. Vincent and Scott Hilliard mentioned just now. And this is the reason some dating coaches recommend watching horror movies to get closer to your partner. So this is one of the example for some people. Why is it fun to watch horror movies apart of wanting to get scared, like you guys mentioned just now, or trying to explain the unknown?
Is this also why a lot of times in horror movies or whatever, right? After a big action sequence, like immediately the people have sex, and you're like, why?
Might be one of the reasons, according to studies, maybe. So to dive deeper on that question, we would like to ask, in a filmmaker perspective, why do people watch horror movies? What do they want to escape through a movie that stimulates fear and anxiety? And also, what's your favorite horror movie and why? Maybe we can start off with Ming's Hugo.
Oh, that's a very loaded question. Well, I mean, a lot of it covered, just covered.
Yes. So let's talk about what's your favorite horror movie and why.
Oh, sorry, I did have something to say though.
You can continue.
I like that horror as a genre can cover actually so many different aspects, right? Going from your spooky ghost stories to your slasher flicks to your psychological horror that aims to scare your head. All of that is horror in a way. And it's quite fascinating to me, like a big part of, if you want to talk about, well, what does the audience get out of it, right? You can't get away from the different approaches because it depends very much on how much empathy the audience has for the characters on screen. Is your empathy with the victims who are doing their best to run away and hide, or is your empathy with the serial killer like Jason or Freddy, where you're just like, oh, I'm here to watch the creative kills and the gore, and you throw as much of that at me as possible. So when watching different kinds of horror, I think the audience knows what they're in it for, and in terms of tone and all that, and they actually change their mindsets according to what they're watching.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what it says about that, but it's quite fascinating to me. Yeah.
All right, interesting point. How about we go to Mr. James Lee? What do you think are interesting in a horror movie that make you want to watch? And maybe you can give you an example of what type of horror movie and why.
I think of recent times, I think the mainstream horror movie that I think is kind of like I like and I thought it's very well made, like the first Conjuring. I thought it's a very well made popcorn horror films in terms of like technically story, the acting, it works. But I do have other horror films that is kind of like hybrid, like what Xiuming was saying, those art house stuff, like It Follows, and so I'm the pretty thing that lives in the house, right? And The Witch. They're kind of quite recent from America. They have all these very strange films. I think Mandy is not a horror; it's an action thriller with Nicolas Cage. So I think I prefer those type of films, but they are the type that I think is going to be kind of like much more difficult to market, because when you watch it, there's that strange execution of the film that normal audience may not be able to get it. It's almost like when they released Drive in US, they thought it's a Fast and Furious, and it's not. So I think there's a lot of this type of horror films that I personally like a lot, because I thought in terms of how they tell the stories and the idea, the cinematography, they're all really like they break away from a lot of the conventional way of making horror films, like for instance Conjuring, and they still tell a very interesting story, and they still could build tension and jump scare once in a while. But I personally think those type of films kind of like will have a long way to go, because it's about retraining the audience to watch different films, because we are so used to go in there, the first 10 minutes it needs something to happen, first 5 minutes I need to see this, and on this point, which is quite true, that's how they write scripts and make the movies effective. But I think that's why it's kind of like these days now, even horror films, if you look at a lot of remakes from Japanese films like The Grudge, The Ring, Dark Water, they're all like Japanese film and being remade. I think Hollywood kind of like run out of ideas to do like really good horror films. That's why they're kind of going to the different parts of the world to delve into their storytelling structure. Like for instance, the vampire movie Let Me In, right? So I think in a way, audience need to give a bit of opportunity for these type of films to be marketed, to be shown, to survive. Because if not, you'll be seeing a lot of American remakes, and sometimes a lot of them are very bad remakes of all these original films. But most people would just watch it, they'll enjoy it, or they'll think it's bad. But I think the biggest downside is you don't see a storytelling or even the horror elements from other parts of the country, from other culture. So and I think why horror film is still really good, because yes, like you said, it does involve a lot of our own tradition and cultural element. That's why it makes it much more interesting and exotic to watch. Compared, if you make a spy thriller, you kind of like get it, all the spy thrillers the same. You're gonna do with politician, government, right? But when you do a horror films, depending on budget, you get to go really deep into the cultural aspect of the people who made this in that country, which I think that's why it's still an interesting for film for me to watch, genre to watch. I still watch them a lot, especially from Spanish. These days, their horror films is kind of becoming much more interesting. So I think, that's the reason why I would watch horror films. But I used to think that The Ring was the best horror films. But I think over the years, as there's better horror films coming up, so my best horror films always change depending on what I watch.
I see. That's a very interesting point. Mr. James Lee bring out different types of horror films. For example, the one made in American, The Conjuring, or the one made by the Japanese, as well as Spanish horror films. So that's very interesting coming from James Lee. And let's move on to the next question for us to discuss more. It is common for us, the viewers, to hear during the shooting of a horror movies, there are actual horror happenings experienced by, for example, a crew being possessed or sound of crying or screaming out of nowhere. These are the example of challenges. Yeah. Is there anything?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've experienced. I have experienced it. Yes.
I think we all have probably.
Yeah. So the question is, we would like to ask, what type of experience that you guys have during filming of horror movies? Maybe you can share to the audience.
Well,
maybe we can start off with Vincent. Yes.
Yeah. For me, this movie, Circle of Bones, we had nothing. We had no experience, no scary moments or whatever. It was very straightforward, even though we were filming in old warehouses, old abandoned buildings. But I have a movie that's currently out. It's out in US release in Amazon and different platforms. It's called Blood Hunters: Rise of the Hybrids. We filmed that like 2.5 years, almost 3 years ago. We filmed that movie in an abandoned Vietnamese refugee camp. This place has been abandoned for over 30 years, and it's in the middle of a jungle. It's completely, it's completely like broken down and stuff. We shot some scenes in a hospital, in an abandoned hospital, right next to an abandoned morgue, and we had a big crew, and I'm not, to tell the truth, I love watching horror movies, but I'm not a believer of ghosts and anything like that. would not believe that any of that stuff. We had 3 incidents that made me question my beliefs. One happened right next to me. We were shooting, probably it was around 1 a.m. in the morning, and we were in a dark hallway in this one abandoned building, and we're shooting a scene. The actors were inside the room. The camera was outside in the hallway. I stood next to the camera. I had my viewfinder there because I wanted to communicate better with my DP. And so it was pretty hot. There was a fan fan on the floor that we turned on because it's so hot in the Philippines. We're in the jungle, and that we turned on the fan, in between takes. So we put a fan on the side, start shooting. The scene started going. Next thing you know, well, we were shooting. The fan turns on. So of course I yell, "Cut!" I'm all pissed off. I'm like, who turned this fan on? I yell at everyone. So I turned the fan off with my foot, and I turned around. I yelled at everyone, "Who turned the fan on?" Well, in the middle of the shoot, and they told me, "Direct, it's not even plugged in." And we looked at the fan; it wasn't even plugged in. Yeah, so that's one thing. Yeah, there was another scene that was actually caught on camera, where because I also act and I direct at the same time. I didn't see it because I was in the scene. I was having a dialogue with another character, and when I came back after cut, I went back to the video village to check the monitor to do the playback, and my line producer and my assistant director, they were ashen faced. They looked like they had seen a ghost, which they actually did. And they told me something came behind us. And we looked at the playback, and we were in the middle of the room, lights on and everything. And there was a dark shadow that crossed behind me and the other actor. And we don't know what it was. And I thought maybe it was just shadows, maybe the lighting, maybe someone moved, maybe one of the grip guys moved or something like that. But we reviewed it over and over. There was nothing. And then so and then the third incident, well, there were 4, but I'll tell you the third one was we captured sound on a take with 3 cameras, and one of the cameras captured sound when there was not supposed to be sound. It was MOS. We weren't capturing sound, and it was supposed to be quiet in the set because it was a fight scene. And when we played back, one of the cameras captured some people talking in the background. And this is in the Philippines, right? But we were shooting in the Vietnamese refugee camp. We listened some more, and it was in Vietnamese. There was not a single Vietnamese in the crew. This was in the Philippines. So anyway, those are our stories.
That's a really spooky experience by your crew. Is there anybody, any directors other than Vincent that want to share their experience on set? On these mysterious happenings around you guys while shootings?
Yeah, Mingxiu, go ahead. Like the playground one.
Oh, right.
Wow, okay.
There, right? Yeah. No, okay. So we have like a sequence set and an old playground in Singapore. I say old, but it's only like 40 years old. But that's old in Singapore already because we just want to tear everything. But so it's an old playground, and we tried shooting there 2 or 3 times. But every time we got there, the rain would pour down. We get set up, and the rain would pour down, and so it took 3 tries to actually be able to shoot the scene. And the thing that was different was that our line producer had gotten one of our department heads to come down, and we're like, "Oh, why?" And she's like, "Oh, because he has like a countering effect on these things." And we're like, "What's going on?" And she's like, "Well, every time that we tried to shoot here, there was like a little boy at the playground, a boy spirit who really liked the actor that was in our scene and would just like be sitting on his shoulders the whole time. and apparently he was causing the rains because he didn't want us to be done, so that we would keep on going back and he could see like this nice big brother over and over again.
Yeah, but our live producer only mentioned something after the shoot was done. So like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, cool.
So it creates an attachment to you guys who are shooting there. So that's really spooky. So how about Mr. James Lee? Have you had ever any experience?
Not on me, but on on an actress who was in my film, Senior Hantu. It's like 10 years ago. We shot in a hilltop. That we didn't know that there was a girl who was murdered that like years ago. She was the murderer was not caught, so she was dumped there. So we shot there, and then because we are running out of time, so we had to go downhill to shoot the car accident scene. So we finished shooting there, and then we all go down the hill. So only the PA, a young Malay boy who was a runner, he was kind of like cleaning up the space before he come to join us. So after that night shoot, he didn't turn up on set the next day, right? So, and the reason he gave, like, he's not feeling well, and then when the PM kind of like push him, like, what's wrong, not feeling well, he finally said that he saw something up on the hill. And the story was so fascinating, I thought he was a good scriptwriter, because I thought that's really the best bullshit I ever heard for people skipping work. He said he saw the actress playing the ghost there on the top of the hill when we all went down, right? The actress played a spirit. She was all dressed in the Chinese red color cheongsam, for revenge, and she's all white. So the kids say he saw her there, and he wondered why she was still there. So he called her out, and when she didn't respond, he walks towards it, and then he said he realized there's no face, right? And then he ran back down, and then he saw the actress there, Mandy. So definitely he said that's not a human being, right? So that was his story. So I thought like that's amazing, man. Now, like most set, I think what Scott said, right? The PM and all this guy, they usually tell the story once it's wrapped because they don't want to kind of scare the whole set. I think it's a culture of that. So after the whole thing was finished, my producer told me the actress herself saw the spirit. Yeah, and the spirit was very curious, like, why is she dressed up like that? Like, yeah. So that was her story. Then I was like, okay, so either the PA and the actress, they just kind of gang up and create this really good story, which I'm about to write, or it's true. But yeah, so that's the only best story I ever heard on my set.
Okay.
There you are, the horror experience by the director themselves, and very, very interesting to hear coming out from the directors. Before we proceed into the next question, let's take a couple of questions from the public. And I have a few questions here for Ming-Siu and Scott. So he's wondering, how do you guys co-directed your movie? How do you guys do it, and how do you guys make decisions for the movies? Coming from Ellen Coy. The question for Go Ming-Siu and Scott Hilliard, maybe we can start with Go Ming-Siu. How do you guys co-direct, and how do you guys make decisions?
First of all, Ellen is my friend, so like I don't know, like you is this like a genuine question? Or are you like
maybe he want to know more in details.
Okay. But anyway, we actually did every single thing together, pretty much. From writing the story, coming up with the story, writing the screenplay, talking to actors, and all that sort of thing. And Scott is only credited as a co-director simply because he was serving national service, which is a compulsory military conscription, while it was being shot, so he couldn't be there on all the days of shoot. But throughout the whole pre and post process, all the major decisions we were making together as a team. And like how do we do it? I mean, we just communicate, lor. Like, what do you think? What do I think? And then this is where we don't agree on, and then why do we not agree? And I think, I don't know, like for me, it balances things out. I feel that it's not just necessarily the point of view of one person, which can be a bit cute sometimes with your own biases and all that sort of thing, right? Scott, do you have anything else to add?
So in a way, two heads is better than one, right? To make proper decisions.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say it's for everybody, but certainly in our case, it works.
It works
Scott,
for
do you
you.
have anything?
Well, I think like for us, like how do we make decisions together? I think it's really because Mingxu's background and my background in film and like in the media is very different. So there are aspects that he would think of more, like he would be able to like come out with make decisions based on certain aspects, but I'm able to make decisions better based on another kind of a perspective. So like we communicate these ideas together, and like we kind of find that middle ground which complements and elevates the story.
All right, so there you go, Alan Coy. Communication is the key. And then let's move on to our next interesting question. We are talking about culture just now, so might as well let's discuss more about culture in horror movies. So in your opinion, how important it is to use the element of language and culture in a horror movie, especially in movies in Southeast Asia? Do we depend on the plot line, or do we depends on the gore, bloods, guts, and gore? What do you think? Maybe Vincent can start the elaboration.
Well, I feel that culture, having a strong cultural background in a horror movie makes it even more frightening because people can relate to it. For example, for me, I can watch like a dozen Friday the 13th or a dozen like Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and it doesn't do anything really. It doesn't scare. It doesn't scare me. Maybe it'll startle me once in a while. But movies like Conjuring, The Ring, things like those, I can relate to because there's similar things that here in Southeast Asia that we're familiar with, and it scares me because it strikes closer to home. And in terms of the fear factor, something that you're familiar with that's still kind of like unknown, but it's culturally familiar. You can relate to it. Yeah, you have to be able to relate to something like that. And I think I think culture plays a big part in a horror movie.
Movies that we can relate with. So the culture plays a very important element. How about Mr. James Lee? Would you have anything to add into this?
Yeah, definitely. I think over the years, I feel like the Southeast Asia, the Asian horror films actually does influence how Hollywood make their horror films these days. Because if you look at a pre-2000 Hollywood, American horror films used to be very violent. Like Friday the 13th, you'll say it's horror film. Their goals all like possession, exorcist. There's a lot of gore, a lot of action, and their horror is very different than Asian. Because our horror is more subtle. It's kind of like if you look at Thai horror, Japanese horror, it's like it takes a very long time to build up the tension. It doesn't have like a jump scare in every 5 minutes. So I think over the years, like those few films I talked about just now, right? Pretty Things, It Follows. I think somehow it influenced how American filmmakers now make their films. At least on the independent side and the art house side, they kind of really take their time to develop the character, the story, and build a tension. In fact, I think I wouldn't even say it's a horror story. But it's a ghost story. No, a ghost story. That's the film that I think is not horror, but I like it a lot. But that film itself, the DP and the director actually in an interview said they were very influenced by Wong Kar-wai and also Archie Chapong. So when you look at the film for the first time, there's a lot of this element in it, and you're like, oh, this is very weird for American film to feel like that. Then when you read the interview, it's like, whoa, okay, they are kind of like looking at Asian filmmakers for reference to make their film, which I think over the years, yes, the cultural aspect is very important because eventually you'll attract. There's no point. Let's say if I'm making another film that's try to be like Conjuring, because they are so good at that. I think for lower budget filmmakers in this part of the world, we kind of need to be much more creative, and I think this will in a way, by hook and crook, it will kind of influence how the bigger filmmakers make their films in future. Like I think The Ring and The Grudge is a good example before the Japanese wave, right? And after that, if you look at their horror films, they are kind of like more subtle, more kind of like slower pace, and have a different tone.
Mhm. So Hollywood are influenced by Southeast Asia horror culture.
Yeah,
according
I
to
believe
Mr.
so.
James.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that, Scott Hillett?
Actually, me and Mingxi were actually talking about that fairly recently. We were saying how like the older horror films, they were the things that like people were more scared of during those times. So like, and then what was it, Mingxi? Was it like the nuclear bombs and all that?
That's the 50s. So 50s, people were worried about the atomic nuclear stuff, and then there were all these monsters mutated by science. Yeah, then you had the after the term serial killer was first coined in the early 80s, you had that whole spate of Friday the 13th type movies going out. Yeah. So yeah, continue, Scott.
Yeah. So actually, I think, well, horror movies change with time. Really, like what is the thing that scares people now? And like with big things that keep on happening, like like people will become scared of different things.
So in a way, the director should follow the trend to make horror movies.
Well, the trend of the world, like what's happening now. Yeah.
So
yeah, like you gotta have your. I mean, as a filmmaker, you can't exist in a vacuum. You know what you make in order to sort of have relevance and that sort of thing, right? You need to remain open to what's going on in your part of the world, what's going on in other parts of the world, and kind of have all these things seep together into like a melting pot of sorts. I think that, yeah.
So it is one of the important elements to create
Yeah,
a movie nowadays.
Like a cultural zeitgeist sort of thing.
I see.
You can't follow trends. There's no point in following a trend. Like that's just stupid. That's just like someone open bubble tea, then everyone go and open bubble tea. For what? Right? But like, what are people concerned about right now? And how does this relate? And is there anything that I have to say about it? Yeah.
All right. Very interesting points. Let's move into our next topic of discussion. Following our previous discussion, we can say that according to Mr. James Lee, again, Hollywood are influenced by Southeast Asian horror culture. In fact, some of his film, Tolong Awi Aku Putianak and Hysteria, are derived from the mystical happenings around Malaysia. And other director tends to create movies, horror movies. For example, taking into consideration the mystical culture in the community. For example, in Philippines, the Mama Barang might be one of the storyline in a horror movies. So using culture is a trend among the Southeast Asian horror movies. So my question is, what is the next trend for horror movies in Southeast Asia, in your opinion? If anybody want to give his opinion, other than using culture, or maybe psychological type of movies.
Well, I think the trend. Sorry, I think the trends will always sort of like they'll always cycle, and they're always based on some kind of cultural superstition or religious background, and a lot of these things will always keep cycling around. Like for example, when they created The Ring, everybody created like their version of it, or everyone was like jumping on the same bandwagon. But that's probably what you mean by trend, but it doesn't really last long. When they came up with Blair Witch Project and Paranormal, everyone tried to make the same kind of thing, right? But then it didn't work. The thing about horror movies is you scare them once, you can't scare them a second time. So, but if you go back and you keep, over time, it'll come back again. Over time, a lot of these trends, when people start forgetting about this one scare, over time, a few years later, maybe even 10 years later, it comes back again, and it's probably just as scary as the other one. There was a time when Hollywood dictated some of the scariest horror movies that I can ever think of, before they started copying Southeast Asia or Asian horror movies. I mean, if you guys remember the movie Exorcist, with which is one of the first. I mean, that was. I mean, I was a little boy when that came out, and I had nightmares for months about it. And then the movie The Shining came out. That too gave me nightmares. That was so unique. But then a lot of people started making like Exorcist 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and say the same thing. When you start making remakes of the same thing in a row, it loses its flavor. But if you wait maybe 6 to 10 years down the line and remake it, then you bring it back. You bring back the scare. And I think there's just so many different. There's so many, especially with Southeast Asian culture. There's so many different sources of horror stories that they don't have to be retold the same thing over and over again. They don't need to be a trend.
There are many possibilities of horror stories. Mr. James Lee, would you think that is it possible for us to find more mystic stories in Southeast Asian country to make a movie in the future?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Vincent. Actually, most of the stories recycle. You just repackage for a different generation of audience, with better filmmaking skills, better storytelling. Like the family moving in the haunted house in Conjuring, it's been done like 100, 200 times. It's just that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The setup, the story is the same. You're just always seeing a new bunch of characters experiencing that situation. So yep, the stories don't need to be original. I think I still feel that the director's vision, how he execute, is the most important thing to make that story refreshing to the audience or to cinema fans. But I personally think the folklore today is not as effective as like 10 years ago, because of how we have progressed as a people in the country, especially even in like Malaysia. Yeah, everybody's living in city, so our horrors now is all more of like urban legends. So it's no longer, if you say like Pontianak, Penanggal, if they're not like heard this story from their grandparents, they wouldn't know what the hell is it. They were like, oh, is this a monster? So I think eventually I feel like we need to kind of really relook at all these things and kind of like retell these stories in a modern way, so audience can know what's a Penanggal in today's terms, and make it legit that why it's still here today in 2020 or 21. So I think there's a detach from this like, okay, for instance, like Hong Kong vampires, the Gyeongsi, those are jumping cops. They used to be my favorite like horror films for a lot of like Chinese film fans. If you watch today on Netflix, it's very dated. It's just like very horrible. But that part is lost. It's hard to kind of remake a movie, a horror action with that. Even though I think they try to do that with Juno Mark. Yeah, just one. I thought it's a very great film, except still it was kind of confined in that it's a genre about the genre. So it's not like a real thing that's set in the river. So how do you tell stories like that in a modern world where we are so attached to our phones, Wi-Fi, and all this stuff? How do you kind of bring all this monster in today's world and make it relevant to today's audience? So I think the folklore is important, but I feel like it's so kind of getting lost in this transition where everything is about special effects, about big budget. That's when eventually you'll just have a vengeful ghost, but have very little tradition in it. Then it's kind of like the ghost in Conjuring. You don't really know the cultural aspect of the ghost, except that she kills the boys, I think, and she's a bit like psycho But so she's a vengeful ghost. That's it. But you don't have a lot of the cultural aspect of it, which I still think is very important for horror films.
I see. How about Go Ming-Siu? What would you think about the culture aspect in horror films, and what is the next trend in your opinion? And what type of horror films would you planning to make in the future? What do you think the trend is?
Well, like I said, I don't like the word trend. I don't. And there's no point chasing after a trend. That's my personal opinion. But coming from Southeast Asia, we are kind of like a land full of migrants, immigrants, so to speak, right? From colonialists to people who came here to work over hundreds of years and that sort of thing. We've have such a rich, vibrant mix of folklore and cultures that it is a bit of a pity if we don't tap on that in some way, lah. I feel, and I think we still can, like. Most recently, the work of Joko Anwar, like a lot of it goes back to folklore stuff. His Impetigore was set in like deep in the forests of Indonesia, and like heavily involved wayang kulit or something like that. And these elements are actually, to a Western audience, they're actually very fascinating because they've never seen that before. Like to us, we are just like, oh, okay, it's kind of cool that he had all these things inside. But to them, they're like, oh my god, that's amazing. What is that? I need to learn. I want to learn more about it. I want to, it's so refreshing to them. And I think it would be a waste if we just kind of decided to all flush it down the toilet and try to chase the next trend, lah. I think it's quite pointless. Yeah.
How about Scott Hilliard? Elements of folklore in horror movies. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think that there will, maybe like even the next 5 years, I don't think that like in Southeast Asian horror films, that element of folklore will be out. I think it's definitely going to stay just because it's so rich. That I mean, like what the others think, like there's been, I mean, there are so many different folklore and like so many different stories from different cultures that have been brought into this region. So it's definitely here to stay, and I mean, it's still interesting to most of us, like like how like what we were saying earlier, we still go back to watch it. So it's definitely staying.
All right. So the folklore is a very important element. So still staying on the folklore elements in a movie, the statement of Southeast Asia is the goldmine for Asian horror filmmakers. Would you guys agree on that?
The what of Southeast Asia?
The goldmine of Asian horror filmmakers. Because we have such folklores that are yet to be showcased for the public audience. So that statement, would you guys agree with that particular statement? Let's start with Mr. Go Ming-Siu.
I think it's there, but the thing is, I definitely agree with James in the sense that you need to have a unique vision to bring that across. Otherwise, it's just going to end up, like Vincent said, Exorcist 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, right? The Exorcist is great because it was William Friedkin's vision. Rosemary's Baby was great because it was Polanski's vision. And what was the other one? The Shining, Kubrick. These are people with directors with very, very distinctive visions and a very unique way of telling that particular horror story, and they were definitely not going by the formula.
Right.
Formula, and you churn things out like a factory, right? Then people are going to get sick of it. Then you're going to be like, okay, is this like the 20th Pontianak film that I've seen come out in 2 years, right?
Yeah.
You're not doing that. If you are using these folklore elements in a very genuine sort of manner to maybe to even say something about the state of the world that you're living in, because right now that actually I would say is a big thing for American independent horror, or maybe others also, to explore social issues in a palatable manner to get the lesson to sink in. So instead of like a message movie, right? Like, oh my god, this movie is about depression. But no, they put it in the guise of a genre movie, or like Get Out is actually about race, right? And like Hereditary is about family trauma and that sort of thing. So if you take these things and you wrap them all up and present them in a fresh new way, and you layer everything, then I don't see a problem at all. Like why like definitely Goldmine is there. It's how you use it, I feel. Yeah.
All right. So that's about the gold mine of the Southeast Asia. Talking about that, if let's touch more on directing and acting. For example, there are independent filmmakers. They want to start filmmaking. What would be your advice to them? Touching about budget or directing, for example. What would be your advice to those independent filmmakers that want to start creating horror films in Southeast Asia? Maybe we can start off with Scott Hilliard.
Well, okay. I think if you're new to the industry, it's very important to understand the whole system, what the media system, how the things work. Where do people usually get this from? Where do people usually get that from? Like in terms of like funding, and how do you begin that process, and what are the end goals that you want? I think it's important to understand that as a big picture. This is really from what I've learned, because this is Repossession is me and Ming Siu's first feature film. So we really just went in. We didn't really know what we were doing most of the time. Like to us, it was just okay. We said we're gonna do this. We're gonna do it. How? I don't know.
We don't know what we're doing in terms of producing.
Yeah, producing. Sorry, yeah. Like with the story and like the acting and all that, like we've already had like a good amount of experience in that. But like with the producing, like how are we gonna get money for this? How are we gonna arrange this? How are we gonna set up this whole thing? How do we organize this team? How do we assemble that dream team and all that? Like we never really we didn't really have anyone guide us per se, but we definitely learned along the way. It was a very steep learning curve. So back to the point, it's you need to understand the ecosystem, and if you don't learn, ask someone about it.
The filmmakers need to get the basic rights.
No, because the thing is, right, there is no point, absolutely no point at all, in making a film if you cannot sell it. You need to get it in front of an audience, and how are you going to get it in front of your audience is a very important part of the question that maybe a lot of newer or up and coming independent filmmakers.
It's a whole different art form. It's not just about directing; it's all about knowing how to market and sell your movies. How about Mr. James Lee?
Who are the gatekeepers, and how are you going to get it past the gatekeepers? That is tricky.
Okay.
Very good point.
I must agree with Ming Siu and Scott. Yes, that whole ecosystem is a whole different game. It's kind of like tough for a young filmmaker to learn it, because usually it's a producer role to tie in with the director. For the director to learn that, it's possible, but it's a lot of work. I could say like, yeah, I'm still kind of lost. Doesn't know how it works in real life, especially when you're dealing with a sales agent in US. They have a different type of stuff. It's really a lot of headache, a lot of paperwork, a lot of like stuff. So that is if you're unlucky enough, you can't have a producer partner to take care of that for you. You have to know, it's a business at the end of the day. Even though if you're making an art house film, it is a business unless it's your own money and you don't mind losing it, right? But otherwise, there's money. There's always accountability. Now, but I would like to kind of like much more kind of like focus on for young filmmakers who are interested in horror. If you're young, you should start writing first script. I mean, I've not done a lot of horror films, but I've read a lot of scripts over the years, right? And sometimes writings from other script writers when they're pitching and we're discussing. Sometimes I believe like if you can already see if the script work or not by the script. When you read, it give you the creep, right? Like, whoa, it's scary, right? And you know your work. So it still comes back to the writing, no matter how a lot of the young filmmakers hate writing. I know because I teach. A lot of them doesn't like writings because it's the most tedious, boring process. But I think the script is very important. If you can write it out and your actors read it, or if they can feel that tension, that scariness, that whole fear, it works. It's true. That is the core process of filmmaking actually for all genre, right? Then your next challenge is to how do you execute it into visual. That's where your directing, your camera skills, all this will come to play. But I will still kind of like focus on writing first, because if you write, you let people read and they just read it and it's kind of flat. They don't see the point. You cannot even write how the jump scares work, right, on paper. It's hard for you to execute it when you're trying to shoot it. So a lot of people think, no, if I have a drone shot, if I have a gimbal shot, I got this scary lighting, it'll work. No, those are the technical things that's supposed to bring your script to life. But your script needs to be really, really scary first. I personally read a number of scripts or writings. Like, I think a lot of people read like online horror stories. I'm not sure if you guys do that, on Reddit and all that stuff. And sometimes they are really scary. You read, you're like, oh my god, this is really scary. And I think that's the amount, the level of writing the filmmaker needs to learn to write, right? Sadly, if you are in the filmmaker, you have to write and direct yourself. If you cannot even have that feeling in your script, which is a text, I think then you have to kind of like rewrite and rewrite. And I think the next best thing is to do short films before you venture on into doing a horror feature length. Because if you cannot do a 5-minute horror films, right, you're talking about 90 minutes, dude. These days, 90 minutes is super long, even for me. I used to watch film like 2 hours, 3 hours last time in the 90s and 2000, and it's okay. Now, if I look at Netflix, it's like 2 hours. I'm like, wow, this long. I was like, should I watch this? So time is a matter. 90 minutes is a lot of free time, free footage for you to tell a story. You don't want to kind of like drag it, and people will feel draggy. So I think the next best thing for new film, because you write a short horror film, 3 scenes, and shoot it out. I think this is the best way to kind of like practice these days, where there's no more reason like to say, oh, I need money to shoot this thing. I think that's kind of like a very a very BS excuse these days. I can understand why in the 80s it's so hard to make film, because everything's on celluloid. It's very expensive for filmmaker to make short films, right? So if you look back at the 80s film, like even Sam Raimi, right, their first feature is still very raw by today's standard. You can see it's very amateurish in a lot of side. But that's because they really did not have that much of like shooting or directing experience. Like today, we can direct a lot of stuff. If you just kind of take a camera, sell your smartphone, you can start doing it and learn to work on the camera work, see whether your script is work or not. And second of all, the most important thing, the last important thing is your actors. Your actors need to be good.
Yeah.
Horror is all about acting, right? If you let's go back to like Conjuring, for instance, which I always use as an example. If you look at the kids, right, the kids in the family, they are damn good actors. If any of the kids are lousy actors, you won't buy it. You will say, wow, the acting is really bad, or you can't relate to it. So I think in horror, acting is the most important thing, and it's more important than acting in a biography for Oscar award-winning film, because you have no reference. It's not like you're acting a love story. I know what love feel. Acting a melodrama. I know how sadness feel. But you're acting in a ghost story. So if an actor have not seen a ghost before, that is a challenge. That imagination, that fear. That's why I kind of very like when I see a good horror films, I really think the actors did a very good job. Maybe the director scared the shit out of them or somehow have a good result. But those are the actings that I think people do not see. They always talk about jump scare, trying to scare the audience first, which is a wrong point. You need to scare the character first. The characters need to be the victim, not the audience. So when you approach a jump scare because you're trying to scare the audience, you're actually detaching from your script and movie. You're trying to do it technically, and you forgot about the character. And I feel like if you want a character to audience to watch the movie, they need to really relate to a character. So that's my advice: script, do a short film, and get really good actors.
So there you go. No money is not an excuse, right? No money is a BS excuse, and you should start with writing, and then do a 5-minute film first. Then you do a 90-minute film. A very interesting point of view. How about Vincent Sobareno? How was it in your experience?
I totally agree with James. I mean, that's kind of how I started a long time ago, you know, with short films. Especially with today's audience, you know, with the Netflix culture, you know, they can jump from one movie to another. You have to grab your audience within the first 6 minutes, between 6 to 10 minutes. I mean, if you don't grab your audience after the first 6 minutes, they're flipping channels right away. You know, they're going to the next movie, that kind of thing. So it's the scripts now really matter. You know, the writing really matters. But sometimes it's even if the script isn't that good, as long as it has a potential, even if it's not as gripping, the director has to be the one who has a great vision. A good director will look at the script and say, yeah, it's kind of poorly written, but I get it. It can actually be super scary. And you know, if I can take this over, I helm this project, I can sort of rewrite this, I can create the timings on my own and make it a terrifying movie, you know. And I mean, there's a lot of I've read a lot of scripts of movies that were made, the horror movies that were made that were quite scary, but I looked at the script and it wasn't that great, but I could see where the director came into play. He made it a lot more frightening, a lot scarier. And then on top of that, you've got great actors. You don't even have to have. Sometimes it's better to have actors that no one really knows about but are just really talented, you know, because then you don't have that star, you know. Once you're a Tom Cruise or something, you become sort of immortal. People's like, oh, Tom Cruise can't die, you know, they can't beat Tom Cruise, you know, they can't beat Chuck Norris. But you have a sort of a nobody that's in this role but it's a damn good actor. It makes it even more terrifying. You know, and I think those elements are important. But all those things come over time. You know, for young filmmakers that want to get started, play with your timing, because you know a script is just a script. A good director can turn it into something really good. You know, so if you can take a short script and make it into a really good 5-minute to 10-minute short film, you know, or make more of those, that's where you practice this. And on top of that, a short film can be your pitch film. You can take a short film that wins a bunch of awards in film festivals, and then you can shop it around. That's what happened to me with my movie Blood Hunters. You know, as a short film, it won a bunch of awards. I'm like, hey, why not? Let me shop it around. And I was able to get financing on the full-length movie because of that. You know, so yeah. So I think it starts with experimenting, learning, honing your skills. Start with a short film. Take a script that you as a director feel has a potential. If it's not well written, you rewrite it as long as the context is there, and then find really good actors. You know, so yeah.
So it all goes back with the director. Excuse me. Yes, please.
Sorry, can I add something also?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and you know, building off of all of that James and Vincent has said, as if you want to make films, it is your responsibility to educate yourself, to go out and watch these, you know, what has stood the test of time. If you want to make horror, you know, what are the titles that people remember 20, 30, 40 years later? Go back, look at them, see how they're cut, see how they're shot, see how the rhythms play into, you know, play with each other and that sort of thing. And then, because you're not gonna learn it by going to classes or that sort of thing. You watch it, you absorb, and then you go out and then you practice, like the practical side of things, right? So it has to work in conjunction with each other. There's kind of no point like shooting stuff if you don't even know sort of like the visual language of how horror films work, or the rhythms of how to maintain tension, build to a scare, and then pull it off.
Yeah. And
So
but
there
above
you
all
go.
that, I think, above all that, I think it's still very important that it is your unique voice. Like it isn't, you're not copying it off of someone, but it's your perspective, it's your voice. I think that's very important as well.
So the director element should be is the most important out of those things. So that's about directing. Let's move on into acting. I have a question from the public here. Came from Rendon Ian Tedus. He asked, how different is it to direct your actor to invoke fear as an emotion compared to other emotion like sadness or love? Is it more difficult? Maybe we can ask Mr. James Lee to answer this question.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I first directed horror films, like yeah, that part was kind of like very tricky for me as a director, because I don't have the experience like bumping the ghosts and screaming, so I totally have no idea how that part would look like. So we have to watch a lot of movies, get a lot of reference, and we have to we did a lot of exercises. This is when I first started horror films, right? Because I have no idea how to get the actors into that state of fear. That if you even watch films like the original Alien, like Signal Weaver, that fear, those are acting, but it's I'm doing horror, so it's kind of different. So the thing is like, yeah, I just asked the girls just to scream. Like scream like mad, like just go mad, scream on top of the lungs. And that was one of our rehearsals. I remember I just asked this girl just to scream like hell, and get that emotion. So because nobody knows like what is it like to be possessed by ghosts, and even if you're possessed by ghosts, you don't experience it. So when you wake up, you're like, what happened, right? So it's the most challenging thing for me to direct. So eventually, as I progress, I kind of like talk to the like when I was doing a Cinera Hantu, yes, then I would ask questions like have you seen a real ghost? How do you feel? But surprisingly, most people, the actors that I know that have that can see all these so-called spirits, because of some people they are kind of sensitive, they are not scared. Most of the time, they are not scared. They just ignore them because they're so used to them. They could see them, they just ignore them. They don't, and let them be. So there's no fear in that in real life too. It's not like the ghost gonna come and kill you and all the stuff. So how do you develop this fear? And then I kind of like finally realized after years of watching, you need to have somebody else at that for the character to care about. So that's why you see some of the best movies is always the wife, the daughter, the families. They are the one who's suffering. Somebody close to you are being possessed, are being disturbed by the disturbance, the relationship. That's the most important thing that make people fear, not of seeing the ghost. Oh, there's a ghost in front of me, I'm now scared. No, it's not that, which I kind of like mistook. I was like, how do you act out fear when there's a ghost? No, it's the harm that's going to bring to somebody that you care about. And it's very, very true. If you look at some of the best horror films, it's always some family members who are caught either being possessed or about to be harmed. So then now I kind of understand. We will try, if the script doesn't have that, then we have to create something between him and another character, or a situation where he could feel like it's not himself or herself is in danger. It's somebody or something that they care about that's in danger in this situation. So to me now, I think when I direct actors, usually I'll try to make sure the script have some of these elements where the protagonists care about somebody else, rather than just like, oh shit, the ghost coming after me. That type of. So it's a two very different type of fear. So yeah, so that's my rough years of like trying to figure this thing out.
So any other panelists want to add into that? Any other panelists want to add into this question?
Well, I mean, not. I have a view, but like it's not really as a director. It's, I mean, it could be linked to a director. So basically, as an actor, I think that if I'm required to portray this horror, this fear, I need to have something to relate it to. Like I need to have like experienced something that I think is as similar as can be to what is required of me to portray. So like I would definitely tap back into my own experiences where it's where I've experienced that fear, that paralyzing fear or the horror, and that what to lump it together, danger as well. And I think if for a director, I think if your actor has not had any of these experiences or experienced these feelings, I think it might be definitely slightly different from the other feelings. So like you would have to explain to them like your own experience, maybe how you would feel, and like like how what goes through your mind. And I think to a certain degree, as long as you explain it well, they hopefully get it.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That makes sense.
Like for example, I think like what Scott was trying to get at, maybe it's things like sleep paralysis are fairly common. I would say like a lot of people have experienced it to different extents in their lives before, and that's like complete paralyzing fear. So if you could relate that to the actor, that would be good, or maybe the actor has already experienced it. But definitely I agree with James as well, in the sense that it is about relationships, about character relationships. I mean, at least for Scott and I, when we direct, we don't tell our actors to invoke a certain emotion, right? It's always like, this is the scenario, this is what is in front of you, this is your loved one at risk, or all that. You place all the pieces in front of them and sort of like let it happen, I guess, as opposed to go like, you must be more scared, you must be more happy, you must be more scared.
Definitely
Yeah.
the actor and the director, the relationship between the director and the actor plays a really, really big part. I mean, I've worked with actors before that the thing is, sometimes the actor will not be able to relate to the script, to the story. They might not even buy into the story. They might not even buy into to the situation in the story. They're like, oh, I don't get it, or I don't think that's what I'm gonna do. There really is. So it's really between the director and the actor to come to a point where the director has to let the actor like really get into that character, and sometimes a lot of actors will base their acting on their own experience, and if they don't have an experience or they have a different experience on something, they just won't be able to bring it out. So sometimes a director has to be able to create a world for the actors, like say, hey, forget, you're not Scott Hilliard anymore, okay? You're James, you're Jimmy Dean, okay? This is your world, and your mother was like this, and your father was like this, and your sister like this, and this is your world, this is your background. You create a whole new background for this actor, and you bring him up into that world, so he gets away from his own world, and then he starts relating to that, So.
I like to jump on Vincent's point about the creating of the world. For us, we found that it works a lot better when the actor is co-creating that with you. So if
I agree. Yeah, it's definitely, you guys create it together,
Yeah.
and then you have a buy-in, right? So
yeah.
To create the emotion together, the director and the actor. That's a very interesting point of view, and
but the character itself, like the character, not just the emotion, but the character itself becomes a dimensional human being because the director and the actor have done their work to build it together.
Right.
I see. Okay.
That's exactly my point. Yeah.
Sure. I wish I can ask more question with you guys, but we are reaching the end of our webinar, and I guess I'm going to wrap up the webinar now. But before that, I want to get the final words from each and every one of you guys. Maybe there's some upcoming movies or any advice for the filmmakers. Maybe we can start with Mr. James Lee. Any final thoughts?
Working on some things, nothing concrete yet. But these days, just for the audience who's looking at this, if you can go to my YouTube channel, support my YouTube channel. I make a lot of short films still on my YouTube channel. So that's where I kind of spend most of my time making films these days. But other than that, nothing really in terms of feature film, nothing yet at the moment.
I see. How about Vincent Soberano? Any final comments?
Yeah, I'm excited moving forward. Obviously, this whole COVID situation around the world has changed a lot of things. I was actually supposed to start principal photography last March on a movie, and we got locked down the same day of the first day of our principal photography, and so that was pretty much everything's on ice. I don't know when things are going to reopen again. We were working on a movie for a major studio in the Philippines, so I don't know when things are going to be back again. In the meantime, my wife and I developed a little web TV show on parenting of all things. So it's another nightmare. So of its own. So we try to stay busy. But we're hoping that things get better over time. I'm still pitching stories, so obviously, just like all of us, still pitching stories. Yeah, but right now, just working in our little TV series.
There you go from Mr. Vincent. Let's go to Go Ming Siu. Any final thoughts or any upcoming projects?
We're still trying to sell Repossession. I mean, this is part of like that huge learning curve that we're talking about, and we've been trying to sell it for much longer than we've been making it, so to speak. I mean, making it is like the easiest part, seriously.
That's so true. That's very true. Yeah.
So that, and you want to talk about like our projects that we're
anything you want to talk about? You want to promote?
Well, I mean, while we're trying to sell Repossession, of course, we're developing a few other ideas. So like we have a serial killer in Safe Singapore, and we have like another one which is more of a comedy. So it's like two Pontianaks decide to take a road trip.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other
local folklore there.
Yeah, local folklore. Yeah, and another one that's like post World War II in the jungles of Malaya. Yeah, which was actually based on a true story. Yeah, so we're developing these few things now while trying to sell Repossession.
Looking forward for the movie to come out. Anyway, we're going to wrap up the session. For those of you who are still watching, please follow these guys on social media. Keep up to date with them on social media. Just type their name in Google or just find their Instagram for their latest projects. And thank you for coming in, everybody. I hope you guys learned a lot from the sharing session from these directors, especially for the filmmakers and for the horror movie fans. I guess I hope you guys are having a good time. And I will be closing the webinar. Thank you to all the panels who take part in the KKIF this year. And then we'll see you in the next webinar with more interesting topics.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.